In an Ohio courtroom, a young teacher with a calm appearance stands before the judge. To many eyes, she could be anyone ordinary. 27 years old, well-educated, devoted to her career, and the daughter of a respected family. But on that day, the veneer of normalcy would shatter irreversibly. What seemed like just a dispute between ex-lovers would transform into a disturbing case of obsession, privilege, and the public downfall of someone who believed she was above the law. This is the story of Hannah Freeman, daughter of a police chief, accused of stalking and tormenting an ex-partner so systematically that it drew the attention not only of the local community but also of experts and the national press. A case that exposed flaws in a system, the vulnerability of male victims in stalking situations, and the way social privilege can delay, but not prevent, the arrival of consequences. What you are about to follow is not just a narrative of crimes and trials. It is an analysis of how the combination of personal obsession and a sense of impunity can destroy careers, reputations, and entire lives. Behind this case lie family ties to the police, controversial legal negotiations, and an emotional breakdown captured on camera, revealing to the world the impact of years of behavior shielded by privilege. But to understand how far Hannah went, we need to return to the beginning, the moment when her public life as an exemplary teacher began to merge with attitudes that revealed something far darker. In 2022, the then fourth-grade teacher was reported by neighbors for disturbance. For any ordinary citizen, it would have been just a minor disorder to be solved with a warning or fine. But the way she reacted revealed far more than a simple incident. When approached by police, Hannah neither denied nor showed concern. Instead, she displayed her shield. "My father is Michael Freeman, police chief. I won't get into trouble for this." It was the first clear sign of how she saw the world. Rules existed for others, not for her. That overconfidence, apparently fueled by years of paternal protection, did not fade. On the contrary, it grew stronger. And when she met David, a middle school teacher in Westlake, her personal life collided with that mentality of impunity. At first, the relationship seemed ordinary. Two educators with stable careers, discreet lives, and the promise of a peaceful future. But for David, that image quickly wore away. In April 2024, he decided to end the relationship for good. For him, the breakup meant turning the page and moving on. For Hannah, however, the end was only the beginning of something darker. From that moment, her presence shifted from a resentful ex-partner to someone who monitored, watched, and invaded David's spaces with alarming frequency. According to GPS records later presented in court, Hannah appeared at the school where David worked 33 times in just 19 days. That meant multiple visits the same day, parking in the lot, watching from afar, without authorization, without invitation, without any plausible justification. This was not impulsive behavior. It was patterned, organized, almost methodical. At the same time, she followed him on his routes home, repeatedly, every single day. Imagine leaving work and noticing the same car behind you, night after night, like an inescapable shadow. At that point, David's unease began turning into real fear. The breaking point came in November 2024. That month, Hannah decided to spend the night at his apartment, even after being told she was unwelcome. When she arrived and found another woman there, the situation crossed the line from emotional obsession into criminality. She broke into David's car, taking personal belongings, backpacks with laptops, his wallet, keys, and even daily medication. Nothing was chosen at random. These were indispensable items, deliberately removed, as a way to force contact with him. The next day, exhausted and out of options, David made his first call to 911. His voice, recorded in the call, revealed suppressed desperation. "My ex keeps stalking me. She shows up where I am, parks next to me, follows me home every night." The most disturbing part was not just the description of her behavior, but the fact that David admitted living with that stalking for an entire month before seeking official help. That delay exposed another side of the story, the social stigma faced by men who are victims of stalking or emotional abuse. Many hesitate to report, fearing not being taken seriously, or worse, being ridiculed. When police finally responded, they found exactly what he had described. Hannah parked, watching, waiting. When confronted, she showed neither surprise nor shame. On the contrary, she responded casually, trying to frame a break-in and theft as something resembling a consensual encounter. That coldness made it clear she did not believe she was committing a crime. To Hannah, all of it was part of a narrative she alone controlled. But from that moment on, the story would take another turn. Charges multiplied, reliance on the family name began to crumble, and for the first time, Hannah faced a barrier that even privilege could not knock down. After Hannah's first arrest, it seemed inevitable that consequences would finally catch someone who thought herself shielded by her surname. The evidence was abundant: GPS records, testimonies, stolen items, even unauthorized financial activity in David's accounts. The set of proof left no room for doubt. And yet, the legal unfolding was surprising. Initially, Hannah faced 5 serious charges: stalking, burglary, 2 counts of grand theft, identity fraud, and even theft of controlled medication. These were severe crimes, capable of leading to years in prison. However, as months passed, those charges were drastically reduced. By June 2025, what seemed like a textbook case of law enforcement against obsessive behavior turned into a controversial deal. 5 felonies became 3 misdemeanors: disorderly conduct, obstructing justice, and possession of criminal tools. For many observers, that outcome was a clear sign of privilege. Not only did the Freeman surname seem to open doors, but the way society often treats women accused of stalking also contributed to softening the process. Experts analyzing the case pointed to a known pattern. When the accused is female, especially well-educated and respected professionally, the discourse often shifts from crime to the notion of someone in need of help. Instead of being seen as a threat to be held accountable, Hannah was framed as a person in emotional crisis, shifting focus from the victim suffering to the accused's supposed fragility. In court, the defense tried to shape the narrative. Hannah's lawyer, Michael Kinlan, presented arguments many considered bold. According to him, the relationship had not ended in April but continued until November, the very day Hannah broke into David's car. That version suggested all her appearances at school, totaling 33 visits in 19 days, were nothing more than help provided to her ex at his workplace. The justification seemed implausible: a middle school teacher needing the constant aid of an elementary teacher, almost daily. The defense narrative went further. The episode where Hannah took backpacks, laptops, keys, and medication was described as a simple misunderstanding. According to the lawyer, she had merely removed the belongings for a few minutes, in an emotional outburst upon finding another woman at David's apartment. The contrast between the seriousness of the facts and the lightness of the defense was stark. For David, nothing was momentary or impulsive. He told police how Hannah knew his passwords, accessed his accounts, and even made online purchases in his name. The pattern was of planned invasion, not a fleeting mistake. That discrepancy echoed in the hearing's atmosphere. When Hannah finally spoke, her words were received coldly. Reading from a paper, she declared, "I definitely acted out of emotion and regret that night. I will move on, and you won't see me here again." The detail was striking. She reduced months of stalking and invasions to that night, as if the entire history could be summed up in a single isolated mistake. For legal analysts, her statement sounded rehearsed, formulaic, and far from reality. There was no acknowledgement of David's suffering, no sign of genuine accountability. Only the expectation that a ritual of regret would suffice to close the case without major consequences. The judge, however, did not share that view. David Mattia, experienced in cases of obsessive behavior, made it clear he did not accept a simplified version of events. In his remarks, he called the situation a bizarre breakup between 2 professionals, stressing that nothing in the case reflected anything pretty about the accused conduct. And then came the sentence, accompanied by strict measures. Hannah would serve 18 months of community monitoring, forbidden any contact with David. For the first 90 days, she would wear a GPS ankle monitor and remain under house arrest, released only for work. In addition, she would undergo mandatory psychological treatment. But the breaking point came right after. As an initial part of the sentence, the judge ordered her to spend 7 days in county jail. At that moment, the mask fell. The instant she heard the order, Hannah completely lost control. Screams and sobs echoed through the courtroom. It was the first time someone who always believed herself protected by name and privilege faced the reality of bars. The breakdown was captured in recordings that spread widely, revealing not only despair but also the disbelief of someone who never thought the law could reach her equally. Her lawyer, desperate, immediately tried to reverse the decision, requesting to withdraw the plea deal and take the case to trial. The judge was categorical. The defense had months to negotiate, and a strategic error would not be shifted onto the court. Judge Mattia's final words set the limit: "Bad practice is not my problem." Hannah left the room escorted, crying and screaming. For many, That moment symbolized the definitive collapse of the idea that privilege could shield her forever. Yet at the same time, it raised an uncomfortable question. Why did it take reaching this point for effective measures to be taken? While Hannah faced jail for the first time, outside the courtroom, experts, lawyers, and the public began deeper debates. Gender issues, men's difficulty in reporting stalking, and institutional failure to act preventively were now at the center of discussion. And there was more. Hannah's path did not end there, because even with prison and the loss of her career, a sense of injustice lingered over everyone involved. When Hannah Freeman was taken to jail, still in shock at the sentence, the public's reaction showed this was not just another criminal case. The image of a young teacher, daughter of a police chief, collapsing as she realized privilege would not protect her, became a portrait of something larger, the limits of a system that often fails to act until damage is already done. In the following days, legal and psychological experts analyzed every detail. For the prosecution, the reduction of felony charges to misdemeanors raised doubts about how far institutional influence still weighed. For victims' advocates, the case made clear how society still treats matters unequally when the aggressor is a woman. Hannah's posture throughout the process reinforced that view. While David described months of stalking, privacy invasions, theft, and account manipulation, she reduced it all to one night of error. That contrast highlighted a classic pattern in stalking behavior: the inversion of narrative. The aggressor presents as misunderstood in crisis, while the victim is forced to justify his fear. David, meanwhile, faced a rarely discussed struggle. As a man, he hesitated to report an ex-girlfriend, aware of the stigma tied to such situations. Many believe men should not fear women, and that distorted view feeds silence. Only when the invasions became unbearable did he feel forced to seek help. His delay in calling police, a month living with daily stalking, was read not as weakness, but as a reflection of social pressure that silences male victims. As the case gained national attention, it opened space for conversations rarely seen in headlines. Studies show men stalked or abused by female partners often hesitate to report, fearing disbelief. Hannah Freeman, while representing an aggressor with a history of privilege, also symbolized that social blind spot. But there was another factor just as relevant: institutional protection. For years, Hannah seemed certain her surname would shield her. In 2022, she had already used her father's position to escape minor trouble. When her relationship with David ended, that mentality intensified. Privilege not only fueled her belief in impunity, but also delayed legal action. Only after months of stalking, theft, and financial manipulation did intervention become unavoidable. For many analysts, that delay is the most concerning aspect. Had authorities reacted firmly at the first sign of abusive conduct, escalation might have been avoided. Failure to recognize and interrupt stalking patterns early, especially when the accused belongs to a protected social group, puts victims at unnecessary risk. In court, Judge Mattia made that evident. His firm stance against the defense's attempts to soften the facts showed limits to any protection network. The order of immediate jail, though brief, was seen as a message: no one is above the law. Hannah's collapse was not only personal but symbolic. For the first time, she experienced real consequences for her actions. The repercussions, however, extended beyond bars. Hannah lost her teaching career, a profession built with years of study. The record of the case made any return to the classroom nearly impossible. Her personal and professional life bore a label unlikely to fade. The lawyer leading her defense also left damaged, publicly criticized for failing to prepare an adequate strategy before the court. David, on the other hand, found some relief. The restraining orders and electronic monitoring finally offered the protection he had sought for months. But the emotional scar of being watched, pursued, and invaded systematically will hardly fade. For him, the sentence represented more than justice. It validated that his fear was legitimate, and that reporting might have saved his life. The case also sparked a wider social reflection. What other stalking stories go unnoticed because victims lack confidence to report? How many obsessive behaviors are minimized until they become clear crimes? And most importantly, how can institutions guard against the risk of unconsciously favoring those with influential surnames or prestigious positions? The path of Hannah Freeman is both a portrait of failures and of correction. Failures for allowing dangerous patterns to continue until reaching critical levels. Correction by showing, even belatedly, that the weight of law can indeed reach those who believe themselves above it. In the end, the uncomfortable question remains: Did Hannah truly understand the gravity of what she did, or just that she was caught? The line between genuine remorse and frustration at losing privilege remains blurry. As she serves her sentence under supervision, that doubt stays unanswered. Perhaps the greatest lesson is recognizing obsessive, controlling behaviors early. When someone insists on invading another's routine, monitoring, manipulating, or refusing to accept the end of a relationship, the risk of escalation is real. The case of David and Hannah shows that delayed action can turn a troubling situation into a traumatic process, with devastating repercussions. And as the Ohio courtroom remains silent after Hannah's public collapse, her image being led away in tears endures as a symbol of something greater, the end of the illusion that some are forever above the law.